All right, hi guys, welcome to round 2 of UiTM InterVarsities. In opening government, we have SMU, is it RAPAC? Yeah, and then in opening opposition, we have IIUM C. In closing government, we have IIUM A. And in closing opposition, we have Allie, etc. I'm Ron, I'll share this round. Currently with me is Roshan and Kenneth. So Roshan will be timing with his app. So if you want any indicator, you can either look to him or the app. On the motion this morning about the African coalition invading Sudan, I'd like to invite the Prime Minister. What do I do like that? It's 35%. She is still like that.
Mr. Speaker, we tell you that there is an intrinsic and inherent valuable duty to protect the people of Sudan, right? The citizenry who are caught in the endless warfare and in the miles of warfare that Sudan has currently been racked with, right? We tell you that the only way in which we can sustainably provide an intervention that would actually lead to peace being achieved in Sudan in the long term, or at least a relative peace being achieved in Sudan in the long term, is for the African Union to invade Sudan, right, in a peacekeeping humanitarian invasion. We will tell you that that is the only way that we can sustainably create peace, considering that there is a lack of there is a complete apathy and a lack of geopolitical will to, there is a lack of international will to go in and invade Sudan and create a peacekeeping scenario, right, or to create a, what's it called? To engage in peacekeeping invasions or in any kind of humanitarian effort, right? So let's talk about what our policy will be. It's simple. We'll get the African Union to come up and send in and pump in troops to engage in peacekeeping services. Which means sit down. Like, let me finish. Like to engage in peacekeeping services, meaning that they will hold like civilian they will hold like civilian population safe against like any kind of invading militants. We will also engage, and this is we will engage in preemptive strikes against these militants. Like, so we will not only engage in peacekeeping in terms of defense, but also in an offensive capacity, meaning that if we see that there is a militant group that is willing to subjugate and terrorize a certain demographic of the population, we will preemptively go in and screw those guys out. We will subject them to a hail of bullets.
So are you going to invade Sudan as in the North Sudan that currently exists, or the entirety of Sudan, including the South Sudan that has seceded?
Oh, we will invade the entirety of Sudan. Yeah. We will invade the entirety of Sudan. We see that to the extent that go, Rafiq.
Okay, so Sudan is the world's youngest country.
Yeah.
Only given it 5 years. Don't you think that we can? Sorry, I mean South Sudan is the world's youngest.
Yeah.
Don't you think that we can give it a chance that the economy can grow? Why haven't all the alternatives like negotiations not working?
To the extent that number one, there is no incentive to conduct any kind of negotiation other than in these areas, but also secondly that the sectarian violence that plagues these areas is so extensive that we do not see that there will be any kind of meaningful peace achieved even in the long run, right? So we tell you that even if we were to give you 5 more years, we will just continue devolving into sectarian violence to the extent that we don't see that there is any one group that is able to develop any kind of meaningful hegemony and that will lead to a meaningful peace by that group consolidating power. We see that the entire area, including South Sudan, has devolved into sectarian violence, right? So what problem are we trying to solve? Obviously, we're trying to solve the problem of humanitarian need, meaning that we see that there are various sects that are constantly warring in these areas to the detriment of the citizens, right? But what that means is also that there isn't one particular sect or one particular group that is going to engage in any kind of hegemony, that is going to get any kind of authoritarian power in order to consolidate power and meaningfully lead the country towards some kind of peace. We don't really particularly care if that is done in a complete democratic fashion or not. We tell you that we have more dire needs, which is that there isn't any peace in the first place, right? So there isn't any group that can even do that, even if it were to try to do it by force, which is currently what these groups are trying to do, right? So to the extent that we are able to go and engage in these preemptive strikes and hold peace, and that we are also happy to provide for opportunities for peace talks and negotiations, and bring these parties to the table to engage in some kind of meaningful negotiation, then we tell you that we are already making a difference to status quo. We're already creating like a paradigm of some kind of attempt at peace or peace in the long run, right? So why is it then that there is no better alternative? There is no better alternative to the African Union invading, right? Mr. Speaker, we see that Sudan in particular, Africa in general, but Sudan in particular, right, especially, right, is subjected to a culture of political apathy by the international actors, right? It means that the UN does not care. It means that various countries do not care about Sudan, because unlike the Middle East, there is no geopolitical incentive to go in and invade or to go in and have any kind of presence in Sudan. Sudan is geopolitically bankrupt in terms of capital. It has no value, unlike the Middle East in terms of oil. There is no development there is no development that can potentially be achieved, and this is recognized by international actors, which is why there isn't any kind of effort to meaningfully invade and to meaningfully stay in Sudan, right? Which means that we see that even so, the problem isn't one of awareness, Mr. Speaker, and it isn't one of creating enough awareness for international actors. There is already strong awareness of the kind of violence that goes on in Darfur, right? We tell you that the kind of violence that these people are plagued with is something that the populations of these developed countries and especially the political actors are well aware of. They just do not want to act on it because there is no reason for them to act on it. Even if they do use the humanitarian reason, it means that the low geopolitical value of Sudan means that at the first strike, right, of these militants against their peacekeeping forces, they are likely to pull out. We saw this in Mogadishu, right, where there was an attempt by the UN to intervene. But the minute at which their people were subjected to violence, we saw them pulled out to the detriment of the local populace. This means that not only is it difficult to engage or create any kind of interventionist force in the first place, but secondly, that if we were to create that interventionist force and that force were to go in at the first strike of violence, which is obviously going to happen, that force is going to pull out and leave the people destitute, right? That also will create that will also create a long-run narrative of indifference, right? A narrative of hopelessness, meaning to say that, oh, we tried to intervene, but eventually, because nothing came of it, nothing meaningful came of it, and because our people were subjected to hurt, we will pull out anyway, right? This area should be left to its own domestic devices. Who then suffers, Mr. Speaker? The person who suffers, the people who suffer are the disenfranchised people of Sudan, who are then left alone and defenseless, and left with the idea of, maybe they will consolidate, some kind of meaningful power, or they will come to some kind of peace, right? That was what Rafiq so concerned, they're young and we should give them a chance. But we don't know the real reason why we want to give them that chance. It's not because they actually have a shot in hell of achieving it, but because there is a huge global indifference to the plight of the Sudanese people, right? Because we don't want to intervene, because we would rather pretend that there is a domestic hope there, seeing that a global hope would require us to get our hands dirty. That is why the UN and international actors in general that we would expect to engage in interventionist actions are not going to be effective. Why then is your African Union going to act? Your African Union going to act, right? We tell you that number one, there is a duty to protect, and obviously there's a humanitarian slant to it, right? Also, you have a collective security as the African Union, but that you need to protect. But number two, we tell you that there is a need to gain legitimacy, and to that extent, the African Union would be happy.
Sorry. Yeah. 1% is
sorry.
Yeah. Just that goes. Will you reference? Yeah. Okay. So there is one. Yeah.
Sorry.
No worries. All right, cool. Leader of Opposition.
Chair, History 101, that in the past 5 to 10 years, South Sudan was able to secede from North Sudan in the current civil war. Therefore, I assume this motion would require the House to argue about invading North Sudan that wasn't able to maintain the peace of the secession. But we can argue both cases. Why is it bad for us to invade the North Sudan, which is currently the Sudan we're talking about, or the South Sudan, which is a separate country altogether? But we'll deal with both. What are the issues in my speech? Number one, why is it that we think African Union isn't a good actor in this debate and the harms of that? And secondly, why we think invasion is bad and the harms of that and the alternatives that we provide. But before that, a quick rebuttal of why is it that currently, according to government, the UN or the entire world apparently doesn't care about South Sudan, and therefore there's no incentives to act because like it's not a country that's attractive enough for people to care about. We don't think so, right? Number one, we think because of the fact that the country contains vast amounts of oil and the ability to determine how these resources are used inherently means that people care about what goes on in the country, even if it's pure economic intentions. We think at least at a minimum that amount exists. But secondly, we think the same kind of humanitarian mandate that exists for the African Union also exists for the United Nations, that cares for countries like Burkina Faso that literally don't contribute to the world's geopolitical crisis at all, but these are countries that the UN still cares about and is actively involved in. And lastly, we think a lot of countries are also involved in housing a lot of Sudanese refugees, and they have an incentive to make sure the generation of refugees from Sudan is stopped, or at least is minimized in the long run. Therefore, we think that in current world, people do care about Sudan, and even if the African Union isn't the agent to act, UN, Pan-African, Pan-Arab forces also exist. First issue, right? Why is it that the African coalition isn't the best actor to act? So I assume the African Union or the African Security Council would be the agency to do this. So who makes a lot of the decisions within these unions? We don't think because of the fact that you're using an African logo or an African body to do this, Sudan would have the ability to say that this isn't a Western intervention or this is an intervention that is legitimate. Oftentimes, the way these organizations are run are by the countries that are more developed within Africa, countries like South Africa, Nigeria, and Zimbabwe. Not only do they have a lot of personal economic interest to also have access to the oils to the oil rigs and a lot of oil pipelines that they want access to, but oftentimes these are also countries, number one, that are also run by a lot of dictatorships, and even if it's not a dictatorship, these are democracies that haven't had elections for the past 5 years, and these are the same people that sit on their country's representative seats within the African Union and the African Security Council. Therefore, there is no check and balance for them to consider what are the costs to Sudan and the harms to its people. And secondly, a lot of times these are the African countries that are widely funded by by the West, especially when Sudan is a country that largely identifies itself as an Arab nation, as an Arab entity, because of the fact that they speak Arabic, because of the fact that they are Muslim, as opposed to their southern counterparts who are the Christian population within Sudan. Therefore, even if the African Union invades Sudan, we don't think there's going to be an avenue for you to argue that these are legitimate individuals that are trying to impose this democracy on us. We think it's going to be worse because of the fact that these are oftentimes dictators that are funded by the West who are doing this. So second question then becomes, why is it that this doesn't actually solve the root of the conflict? Because we think that the reason why oftentimes the North believe that South Sudan used the excuse of religious and sectoral division to take away a lot of the oil pipelines and a lot of resources that they were entitled to as well. Therefore, we think South government also has to defend a scenario where the African Union can equally distribute or actually solve the situation in which South Sudan believes that resource distribution is the main cause of the problem, and we don't think that's going to happen because we think whatever the African Union decides would obviously seem like a blatant discrimination of the Muslim population within Sudan who believes that they were stripped of their resources from South Sudan, and we think because of the fact that there was no Arab involvement within the African Union, they would always seem that there is a discrimination on Sudan when it comes to resource distribution. We think that that's what perpetuated the cycle of violence for the past 20 years in Sudan to begin with, because of the fact that they believe that fair distribution of resources wasn't taking place. And oftentimes, this narrative is used to perpetuate local militias to not respect the borders that South Sudan had set up for themselves, to continuously attack individuals within South Sudan whenever South Sudan, either through airstrikes to actual entering those villages and actually attacking people. We think those are the kinds of narratives that are used by Sudan to make sure South Sudan doesn't live a peaceful life as a new fledgling democracy. Before that, yes.
So, am I to understand that opening opposition's case is to have pan-Arab forces invade instead?
No, our alternative doesn't involve any invasion per se. But why do we think invasion is bad? Number one, we think oftentimes invasion, we think that even if Sudan isn't respecting the secession of South Sudan, an invasion means that you're telling this country that other than you being able to perfectly execute a referendum and division, we are going to invade your country. Oftentimes, the significant effect this gives is that unless you are a perfect democracy, it is okay for us to enter your country and invade your country. This often means it's very difficult for you to gain any trust in democracy for Sudan because of the fact that they believe unless they can control all local militias within Sudan, we don't have the capacity to run our own country. Therefore, we think in the long run, their trust within democratic processes within Sudan is largely destroyed. But not only that, but there are lots of immediate harms. We think the moment you propose a threat of invasion, Sudan have incentive to actually actively have preemptive strikes in oil rigs in South Sudan, in all the resource areas, because they want to attack it as much before any invasion happens. We think the immediate human cost to South Sudan, which you are trying to prevent, is very high. But we think the alternative doesn't have to be invasion, which has so much of human cost. We think not only is pan-Arab involvement very important to have legitimacy towards Sudan, but you need things like sanctioning the individuals who actually benefit from making sure that people on the ground don't get any trickle-down benefits of the resources they think. And we think a lot of political negotiations as to how these resources can be distributed between South Sudan and North Sudan would need an eventual halt of the root of the problem, which is distribution of resources. We think an invasion inherently tells these individuals that they are not entitled to the resources which they currently fight for, and that's the reason why they went to war in the first place. We think you cannot solve anything unless you solve the root problem, which is resource distribution.
All right. Let's continue this debate, and we will invite the
Sorry, let me just tie this up. It's everywhere. Is it being live streamed?
It's cute, it's cute.
The problem with the case coming out of opening opposition was that their biggest problem was one of resource distribution. Yet we never actually heard how they were going to resolve the issue, besides perhaps some vague hope that these people would just get their shit together given enough time. Like newsflash, I think that South Sudan and North Sudan are in a state of civil war and they happen to be fighting each other. It's not simply a problem with resource distribution. We're able to just wait and that things, just wait and hope that things are going to be better. Because as Hari pointed out in his speech, it was made very clear, lives are being lost, and as cliche as it might sound, people are dying every day in the state of war that South Sudan is encountering now. The problem we saw was one that was a lot bigger. The problem that we saw with the African community was one where there existed essentially a state of anarchy. Right? Even though the African Union theoretically protects collective security, the issue right now in North and South Sudan is that these countries feel as if they are empowered to engage in these acts of belligerence, right? Because there's no higher authority which checks these countries when they act in a manner which is aggressive to each other, when they are able to feel as if they are able to saunter across the borders and snatch those resources, right? Our solution to that problem was very simple. What we wanted to do was empower the African Union to actually enforce the collective security that they promised to the other nations of Africa. I think the important mechanism there was one of a signaling effect, right? Because at the point where we were able to invade Sudan, both of them, I'll talk about why that's important later. We show that it's not acceptable for countries, no matter how young, it's not an excuse, Rafiq, but no matter how young, ought not to be engaging in these violations, of human rights. We think that Sara set the bar very low when she said, oh, you can't expect them to control everything, oh, they didn't do it perfectly, we just couldn't. Well, it's not nice to invade them because they didn't do it perfectly. Right? We agree they didn't do it perfectly. But we think that they did a lot worse. We think that it was a lot worse than they tried to portray as being. Right? This is actual sectarian conflict. Chemical weapons are being used by both sides. We see atrocities being committed, the slaughter wholesale of villagers in order to terrorize civilian populations into supporting one side or the other. But now that I'm done with that, I think you had something to say? Right.
Look, as bad as Sudan is in maintaining the truce, the basic minimum of the secession was maintained. You empower current militia groups who continuously use this ploy of invasion to continuously attack South Sudan.
So at the point we invade, the deterrence against these militia groups comes in the form of bullets and shells. We come into this country, we invade, we have militia groups, for example, attacking your AU peacekeepers, we will shoot them back, we will shoot them, they will die, and after that we think there's a very strong disincentive to continue with these militant activities. Things like that was rather clear coming out of my PM as well. Right? So we think that yes, why do we need to invade both North and South Sudan? We think that neither of these Sudans are playing nice. Right? We think that to the extent that both of them are engaging in serious human rights violations, we do have the mandate to punish both of them at the same time. We also want to avoid any perception of illegitimacy or any perception of bias. If the problem is one where these two groups both feel as if they are oppressed and they are being treated unfairly by the existing political power dynamics, then we think we have a good solution, or we think that it is a good signaling effect if we were able to invade both and ensure that we are not biased in ensure that African Union is not biased in how it polices the behavior of these particular countries, right? So we think that yes, the most important. So we think that is particularly important for. So yeah, so why do we think that the UN is able? Why do we think that the African Union will be in the best position to do it? We think that this idea that Arab involvement needs to happen in order for this peace to be sustainable is something of a washout, because we think that Arab involvement isn't particularly strong in the UN either. Right? But we think that having this African Union step in is likely to produce better long-term results, precisely because of some of the arguments they came up with in the first place. Like the idea of refugees, the idea of a spillover in terms of civil war, means the African Union has a stronger vested interest to enter and stay there and do the invasion properly, rather than engaging in a touch and go in the way the UN has done. Furthermore, we think that in terms of just mechanism, right, it's more effective because the UN has tended to rely very heavily on strategies such as your no-fly zones and your airstrikes, which are less effective in protecting civilian populations than having troops on the ground. We think that at the point where there's troops on the ground, like actual AU peacekeepers stationed on street corners and in these civilian centers, we think that it makes it a lot more difficult for either side in the war to use, for example, chemical weapons or indiscriminate weapons like your cluster munitions, for example, due to the risk of hitting your EU peacekeepers and causing a spillover or earning the ire of the African Union itself. So why then do we think it's also why then do we think that this African Union will necessarily be fairer than the UN? We think that first of all, no thank you, right? So we think that first of all, African Union doesn't act as a monolithic body, right? We think that yes, they're right to say that multiple countries constituting this union, South Africa, Zimbabwe, etc. And we think at the point where we have a multipolar system where that power is distributed across multiple actors, what that creates essentially is a balance of power where these nations are able to check each other. We think that that's very good. We think that process of checking allows for at least some form of check and balance and prevents African Union essentially from overstepping its power Right? We think that's fairer. But at the end of the day, let's just examine what the broad comparatives are on either side of the house. The side of the house was one that never really showed accountability. For all the talk about resource distribution and lack of Arab involvement being the real problem, we never really we never really saw how they were going to resolve these issues. Right? We never really saw what the recourse would be for the people of Sudan. We think that our action, first of all, provides a lot more immediate recourse, and second of all, we showed how we essentially allow how having the African Union exercise its power helps to move like Africa towards evolving into a security committee rather than the current state of anarchy, where states feel like they are not really checked when they want to just go in and take the resources. Right? Our world is one where we actually create a more sustainable peace for all the nations involved. We don't think that. So we show how we create like a longer, more sustainable peace. How we are able to immediately go in and resolve and to protect the rights of all the people involved in Sudan. Like we think on these two counts, we can this debate.
Alright, and to end the opening half, we have the deputy leader of the
The reality of invasions is that it leads to a lot of collateral and leads to a lot of casualties. This side of the house has to tell me why it's very likely that this invasion is going to be successful. Because even if you tell me that people are going to die, the reality is that more people are also likely to die in an invasion. Particularly when I'll show you how we'll spiral back into more conflict and more war. First question in this debate that I think they have not answered, and I have three questions. Number one, why African Union is the worst actor. Number two, how this will eventually spiral into conflict of Sudan. And thirdly, why we think our alternative is far superior in the long run. All right, so the first thing, why African Union is the worst actor. And this is why I think first speaker and second speaker did not deal with a lot of the material coming from Sara, right? So the first thing that Sara told you was that North Sudan doesn't identify necessarily as Pan-African. Anything that you attempt to invade them will necessarily be seen as illegitimate form. So therefore, that's incredibly dissuasive to the likelihood that your invasion is going to be successful. The second likelihood is that even if you can tell me that as a government, we have the ability to get all the African countries together and get them to fight in the war, you're still not telling me why that's likely going to be successful. Because what you forget is that this is the African Union, not the UN, right? And that likely means that they have very marginal resources in comparison to things like the UN peacekeepers. But secondly, they just don't have technological expertise to make sure that this sort of invasion will be successful. And that necessarily means things like more collateral. That necessarily means things like more lives lost. So on a very real world perspective, they haven't shown me how it's going to be successful. But the third and most important thing is that what internal checks and balances does the African Union have to make sure that it's going to be successful? And the first thing that we analyzed was that they oftentimes are led by large dictatorships or countries that are not democracies to begin with. And that necessarily means they have different agendas. What does that mean, right? It means that their long-term interests are not necessarily to institute democracy, but necessarily to do things like bleed Sudan, drive from the oil wells it currently has. That's a lie that it doesn't have any resources to begin with. But the second thing we think is problematic is that we don't really have the ability to institute international pressure because the African Union is relatively isolated from the rest of the international community. And that makes it extremely difficult for us to push on things like UN peacekeepers or ability to institute that long-term democratic change that we want. But the second thing is that African countries are necessarily dependent on Western intervention, right? And that necessarily means for Western nations to cut off African countries or to push sanctions, it becomes incredibly difficult for them because that necessarily means sacrificing human lives on the ground of those Pan-African countries, which those dictatorships know they will never do. Secondly, why do we think this is worse for Sudan in the long term and spirals into conflict? The first thing that we have to argue here is that the ability for long-term democratic change is extremely important. So you have to deal with the crux of the civil strife, right? And that's necessarily religious and economic distribution. because you're very unlikely to see long-term conflict resolution. Notice how this ties into the initial argumentation, right? That because it will never be seen as a legitimate form of invasion, it necessarily means that the Muslim majority will never ever be satisfied with the resource distribution that you necessarily put in place. Right? That means the invasion is likely going to be seen as one of an imposition. And that means that it's only going to spiral into more and more strife because individuals will fall back into war at the behest of the militias. Let's notice the comparative here, right? The comparative is necessarily controlled borders skirmishes that maybe do get out of hand sometimes, but are relatively self-contained and are relatively short-term, right? What's likely going to happen in the long term for them is that it's going to be to long-term attempt to control those oil rigs and oil expansion because it's never going to be seen as fair, and that leads into far more severe strife. But the second thing we have to understand here is necessarily the geopolitical region that Sudan is in, because you have to understand the priority should always be peace and not invasion. Understanding that rebel groups and militias exist, and also terrorist organizations like IS and Boko Haram exist and have continuously been growing homegrown radicalization within these countries. Why do we think it's very, very likely that this sort of destabilization will lead to them gaining massive amounts of power that they have already been gaining? Number one, it introduces large amounts of arms with very little control. Understand that African Union is not the most technologically advanced, right? And when you introduce a large amount of arms into a destabilized regions, it's very likely that your militias or the arms fall into the arms of wrong individuals, right? And that necessarily means that groups like ISIS are likely to garner more power and likely to use those arms in wrong fashion. But secondly, we think you just have a large concentration of desperate individuals, right? Who believe that they're being invaded illegitimately and who believe that their government has failed them. And that necessarily means that they're likely to be pushed into the hands of these militias who believe that they want to fight for security. So even if they aren't religious extremists, right? For the sake of security, they will fall into these rebel groups. But the third thing is that there's been a huge influx of refugees in recent times into Sudan to begin with. And the problem with that is that you have a large group of people who are necessarily desperate, who have nothing to lose and everything to fight for, who are going to be pushed into these groups. And that's why we think we need an extremely peaceful resolution. But the third thing is that the current religious tensions are only amplified, right? So it's very easy to radicalize these individuals because Muslims already hate the Christians within these countries to begin with. This is like a right explosion waiting to happen. Lastly, why is our alternative better? So the first thing is to clarify what exactly is the alternative that Sara has told you. Political negotiations, number one. US peacekeepers to institute peace, but not to invade. That's extremely important. But the important thing is the multilateral inclusion of interactors and to give things like aid to Sudan to pacify them in their resource woes, right? So instead of using that resources to invade Sudan, we use it to pacify the resource qualms that they have and the religious, the unfair distribution that they always complain about. Why is this extremely good, right? Because number one, we think that the threat of invasion always hampers the ability for you to get political negotiations. Because any resolution will always have the perception that it's being imposed upon us. But the second thing is that it's about long-term democratic institution of change. So at the point where you invade, you're likely to destroy the economy. You're likely to, or South Sudan is likely to self-sabotage. That likely means that preserving Sudan, at the very least on the outside, we get to preserve Sudan's fragile economy, and that necessarily means that on a long term, those individuals are far likely to be better. For all of these reasons, I'm very proud to oppose.
Just 1 second. you very much. So we'll have the extension from the government.
Members of the floor, I understand the confusion that happened in the opening half, but I think there needs to be a clarification as to what that confusion was. Their confusion was that I think they sort of misread the motion in assuming that Sudan meant the inclusion of South Sudan, when in fact South Sudan is a country of its own, and I'm sure that everyone was fully aware of that. Given that, CG would like to make this debate very clear and debate the motion in telling you why the African Union and why their entire military coalition should go in and invade Sudan, not South Sudan, right? Given that, two questions. Number one, why is there a principal obligation on part of the African military coalition? And number two, why our policy would help in providing sustainable peace? Most of our rebuttals will be integrated, but I'd like to directly engage with this point of extremism that came out from Syarif. Because Syarif told you that a lot of the times when invasions happen, people are pushed into corners of desperation. As a result, they turn towards these rebel groups and these extremists to survive. I think that's more likely to happen in opposition's world where status quo perpetuates. Why? In your world, where the minorities are dying, they are being cut off of resources. They already have Western sanctions and already have certain Western, anti-Western sentiment and aren't getting help from the West. They can't turn to the Arabs because the Arabs are popping out a lot of these dictatorships. They can't rely on the AU because they feel that the AU is just, saying that we would remain neutral and handle with our local problems and not deal with what's happening in Sudan. That's when they run to the extremists, right? Because they feel that the extremists are the only individuals who would have the ability to provide them resources and they would turn towards these rebel groups. But secondly, I think this is where it empowers the rhetoric that these rebel groups have, that you cannot even rely on your own brothers in order to survive people who have regional proximity and regional familiarity with you. That's why you need to turn to us, because you have no other options. And like you said, if they are pushed into a corner of desperation, perhaps it's better that we give them another form of alternative of surviving rather than having to surrender their lives towards the group of these individuals. No. First question, why is the principal obligation of the African military coalition? Firstly, it's because it's a time-sensitive matter. We firstly heard this from opening government, but we don't think opening government gave you full context as to what's happening within Sudan. We think first off, Omar al-Bashir is still very much relevant, is in power, and is still enforcing influence onto the people currently to violate the rights of the minority. The fact that there is a majority Muslim that still oppresses the minority Christians, whether it's in the form of direct killing or the form of cutting off of resources and necessary items for these individuals to be able to survive. The fact that, even after the ICC said, we are going to persecute Omar al-Bashir, but because they couldn't get their hands on Omar al-Bashir, the fact that despite that, the bombings that happened within the mountains of the minority tribes, within the minority Christians, the Rizana tribe, the fact that individuals still get killed every day, and the fact that news media picks it up and says that this is the genocide that people rarely hear of, because people sort of assume that problems are being solved, the point where ICC says these individuals ought to be persecuted. That's how bad situations are. We have tried negotiating. We have tried giving Omar al-Bashir a chance. We have tried to pressure him, whatever status quo means, have tried to do, but we couldn't do it. That's why we feel that it's a last resort for us to go in and invade them based on this coalition. No. But secondly, the second reason why we have this principal obligation is because without it, there exists no accountability for this genocide to perpetuate. Given that the ICC has already said we want to persecute them, but because they have no ability to go in and pull Omar al-Bashir out, that's why Omar al-Bashir and a lot of his followers feel that they have immunity, right? That despite what the international organization says, there is no action to actually go in and make us bleed or make us hurt in order to feel like there are consequences towards our actions. The point at which we go in and invade, and given the fact that the African Union has more resources than Sudan, because it's South Sudan that is rich in oil, not Sudan, means that a lot of the times we are able to draw out this conflict, but also have better resources in comparison to Sudan. And it's untrue that we don't have the technological means. In comparison to Sudan, we do. We have the ability to go in and make them hurt in order to push them into a corner of desperation. No. This attitude of arrogance that exists on the ground of the Sudanese oppressive individuals means that it has led to minimal progression in negotiations. And because they feel that they have absolutely nothing to lose. We don't want that.
No, thank you. We would not just stay for the conflict, right? But a lot of the times invasions also now mean that you get to force elections, that you get to create an interim government. It means that you are also able to enforce punitive measures for anyone who tries to disrupt your invasion or your ability to sustain peace. No. Why would our invasions have a check and balance, directly engaging with what OO said? Because it's not a unilateral form of like invasion where you have one dictatorship government going up against another dictatorship. The fact that each country now cross-checks the other to ensure that no one interest perpetuates over time. No. But secondly, we think that you also want to show that you're capable, right? Because at the African bloc wants to show that when local governments fail, you don't immediately turn to UN invasion, given the fact that there's anti-Western sentiment that exists on the ground. That a lot of the times, after local governments have failed, before you go to the UN, you want to show that the AU bloc is functional and can deal with the local problems that exist within their regions. And we think that's why there is a further incentive for the AU to make sure that this is something that works. If closing has anything.
You are just assuming that the African Union invasion are going to bring benefits like political stability and election. How do you then prove that benefit?
Okay, thank you. I'll tell you that as to why this will work, right? But just lastly, thirdly, why we have a principal obligation is simply because of familiarity, right? Because we think that currently, given the fact that there are regional proximity, means that when you invade, when there is collateral, you are less likely to just uproot and leave because you will stay post-conflict, because you have an interest to ensure regional stability, because you depend on border security and trade based on these other countries. But why will our policy work? We think our policy will work because it increases the likelihood of Omar al-Bashir to give himself up. The reason why currently Omar al-Bashir, despite being persecuted, cannot be caught by the ICC is because he feels confident when he travels, or the fact that neighboring countries never have a will to want to send him out. The point at which the AU takes the stance and say we will invade you because of your actions means that Omar al-Bashir feels that there is less support from neighboring countries. He is less confident, less able to take in goods and trades from other countries, and less able to travel freely to ensure that he gets to collect resources, means that he is further pushed into a corner to give himself up. Even in the worst case scenario, that he doesn't give himself up. The point at which our resources collected together with the desperation that we at least push Omar al-Bashir to now in comparison to before, means that it at least creates more of a will on his half to come towards a negotiation. The reason why this argument is the most important argument in the debate is because even when people are killing, we need to ensure that even in the worst case scenario that we can't take him out, we ensure that there is some will for them to at least provide some form of ability for those minorities to live. It was never clear in opposition's world how they would ever provide that, despite the ICC, despite well-capable of governments trying to take up action, we are still facing bombings in the minorities of these individuals, and that's why we need to go in and invade based on the AU. Thank you.
One second. Okay.
All right, so now, thank you so much. Cool, so we'll have the extension from you all.
Panel of adjudicators, the confusion in this room is palpable, and we on the side closing opposition want to enter this debate. Before we get into any form of argumentation, we want to provide you with context and why this conflict is even occurring and how this conflict is likely to be solved. But before that, I want to remind the panel of adjudicators what the metric of this debate should be, because this debate got really lost from trying to save lives to trying to create a deterrence narrative to trying to create a narrative about Africa, etc. But really, this debate needs to just be about three things. First, it's going to be about conflict itself and on which side of the house are you likely to get less casualties, and more civilians in places of safety. Secondly, this debate needs to be about what's best for Sudan. Not only Sudan, but also South Sudan, because we believe this conflict, as much as it is, as we agree, that it's centralized in the north, but that's only because all the oil fields are mostly in the north, not in the greener part of South Sudan, which is bordering the Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda. It's in the more like barren, arable lands in the north, bordering Egypt and Chad. But thirdly, we want to also talk about what's best for the African Union and the African region in of itself, and how we as Africa trying to move forward from this post-conflict society want to rebuild our nation. But firstly, a bit of context, a bit of history as to Sudan itself. So Sudan got independence from Britain in 1956, and then went through a period of pan-Arab nationalism inspired by the Nasser regime in Egypt during the Suez Canal crisis. So Sudan was then, despite the Arabs being a minority, only 40% in that nation, they took power in a military coup in 1989 and has gone through a period of Arabization. Arabic is their official language. Al-Bashir is their leader. Al-Bashir also targeted members of the black African community who constitute the majority of the country during the Darfur insurgency in 2003. If you remember Darfur, right, guys, from our old matter files, with the Janjaweed government militia group. So the Arabs are the minority, and they are trying to, they have been systematically disenfranchising the black African majority. Now, the conflict right now is not per se a humanitarian conflict, so much as it is a resource conflict, and this is the reality on the ground. We have moved on from the days of Omar al-Bashir being a tyrannical, unreasonable, racist dictator who is hell-bent on ethnically cleansing his nation from black Africans. Today, the conflict is more nuanced. We are witnessing inter-city, inter-tribal conflict. Because when North and South Sudan had secession, South Sudan got the shittier end of the deal. Whereas most of the oil and iron resources are centered in places like Wadi Halfa and Kosti and Port Sudan, which is up north with Egypt. A lot of South Sudan got the greener parts, which were, and they didn't really have the resources to move forward. So what happens now is that communities are being thrown out of their lands so that tribal leaders can take over the lands and sell those lands off to oil prospectors. We also see 8 envoys, like our dear friend Jano Libot from the Philippines, who volunteered in South Sudan. He talks about, if you watch his interview, he talks about how 8 envoys have been denied entry into Sudan, how dissenters and people who are trying to rebel and resist are being shot and killed. So relatively, it's not as bad as the Darfur ethnic genocide, but it's a lot more of an economical conflict today. So what are the alternatives we support, right? A, we support the UN stepping in, as they are already trying to do, trying to have peacekeeping forces to allow envoys to reach vulnerable individuals. But secondly, and more importantly, we support negotiations, because this is an economic conflict. And right now the UN, through power brokers like Norway, Switzerland, as well as other Arab countries like Bahrain and UAE, are already attempting to contact members of both administrations to try and have negotiations. They're also calling in Chinese and Arab oil companies who have interest in the region, such as Sinopec, such as China Petroleum, who also have a vested interest in this conflict. So right now, negotiations can work, and Bashir is reasonable. Yes, he's done horrible things in the past that I agree with Matt, but don't forget, he also formed a unity government after the military coup in 2003. He entered negotiations to agree to the secession in 2011 with South Sudan. He is a horrible man, perhaps no more worse than Mugabe or Idi Amin ever was, or any African dictator you can name, but he is a reasonable individual who can enter into negotiations. So that's the reality we support. As long as we prove less people die on our side and we're more likely to solve the conflict, we can win this debate. So firstly, no thank you. How does this conflict get worse? As I said, it has a history of becoming a sectarian conflict. What happens when the African Union now steps in? It will be seen as the African Union attempting to take sides in what has historically been an inter-ethnic conflict. The danger of this, ladies and gentlemen, is that it will heighten the Arab paranoia that exists among many Arabian communities in Africa. Because a lot of Arab people in Africa don't see themselves as African. They see themselves as Arabic. People living in Egypt, Morocco, Chad, as well as Sudan, for example, many of them have separate identities to that of black or Christian Africans, for example, who follow a lot more the colonial legacy. What's going to happen is that likely these Arab communities within Sudan are going to see this as an attack on the African Union, who, by the way, are dominated by black African nations like Ghana, like South Africa, like Kenya, for example, who are going to be seen as attempting to wipe out or to fight back against the Arab power. So we think that's going to worsen the conflict. On your side of the house, the conflict gets a lot worse. On our side, with peacekeepers and through negotiations, we can work out a better deal. Secondly, how this foments inter-ethnic division in the African Union itself. Don't forget, even within the African Union, we have many countries who are Arab, mostly Arab dominated as well as Black African dominated. What's likely to happen is that once we get involved in this conflict, we're going to see the African Union splinter as we have seen before. We've seen, for example, how the African Union, through its involvement in conflicts, for example, in Egypt as well as in Somalia, spurred a lot of inter-religious conflict within members of the African Union, right? When we intervened in Somalia, for example, Egypt got quite angry because we were targeting Muslim insurgents in Somalia at the time. When we intervened in Togo in 1993, Ghana and Benin got angry because we were taking sides in ethnic conflicts that a lot of these other African countries had also ethnic interests in. So we think right now on your side of the house, you're going to force the African Union to splinter because half of them are going to have to protect the Arab minority, half of them are going to have to want to protect the Black African majority. Yes?
You cannot on one hand say we don't want to interfere because we don't want to be seen as taking sides. On the other hand say, but we will make them negotiate and force them to not discriminate the minority, which is rich.
So what we support is under our negotiation deal, we want like a transnational economic plan where oil and iron resources can be shared between different groups. Because right now there's not enough resources in South Sudan are dirt poor, they have nothing to build their economy on. We want to equate that, and we think the negotiations can work better. The third thing I want to talk about is how this provokes reactions from China and other Arab states. What's likely to happen, because right now a lot of these oil interests and oil iron assets in the region are being sold to Chinese and Arabian contractors under the Bashir regime. What's likely to happen is under your side, China, like the same way they did by bolstering money and investments in the Mugabe regime when everyone decided to sanction him, is likely going to want to buy up more and more and bolster more and more money into the Bashir regime in order to consolidate their power in the oil assets in the region. So China and the Arab nations of Bahrain and UAE are going to put more money to try and defend their oil assets, defend their Arab minority government. And lastly, we think this is bad for business. 4 out of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world are in the African region. If the African Union cannot respect sovereignty, cannot allow a new nation state to work out its dispute, we think this is going to push investors away and lead to even more harm. So we're very proud to oppose.
All right, can we have the whip from the top?
Firstly, Black Africans can also identify as Arabs, just saying. But secondly, I think this is where debating gets a bit annoying, when the extent of lies perpetrated is way too much for an average intelligent person to bear. The reason why it was so difficult to get South Sudan seceded from Sudan was because Sudan didn't want to give up all the oil. I think an average intelligent person should know that. That would leave the desert in Sudan, not South Sudan. But we will assume that CEO's version of reality is correct and still beat them on it. 3 things to debate about. First, an actual identification of who dies now and who needs protection. Second, why is this likely to be successful? And third, why is AU a good actor? I think that the last 2 are interrelated. So first, who dies now? And I think this is where like a lot of where CG comes in, right? So the opening opposition and even closing opposition kind of like assume this debate is about some strife and civil conflict between Sudan and South Sudan, whereas not really, right? We think the vast majority of conflict currently is not between 2 countries warring against each other because, a truce exists. What's happening currently is that within Sudan, minorities are being oppressed. And it's not just oppressed. What did we tell you? We told you that ethnic cleansing is literally happening right now. We are talking about Rizana people. So if you belong to this tribe, for example, your daily routine involves getting up around 6 to 7 a.m. and hiding under a rock while 4 hours of bomb shelling happens in order to eradicate your tribe. It also involves starving because aid cannot go ahead into your region. I am sorry, but even if your negotiations work, it will never be fast enough to prevent the ethnic cleansing that we need to stop right now. So all system of, oh, let's be neutral, not intervene, and somehow assume negotiations will work when it hasn't done for bloody decades, we don't think that will happen for these people. At the very least, ladies and gentlemen, the immediate benefit that we can guarantee on our side is the delivery of aid to these individuals, but B, the protection from eradication of peoples within South Sudan. We think that's an exclusive benefit that closing government alone should win this debate. But secondly, why is this likely to be successful? So this is where we come in, right? We told you, look, and we agree with them. Sanctions hurt. Guess who's being sanctioned right now by the West? It's Sudan. So this means when their allies currently from Africa, like, let's assume that Sudan has this oil, but they really sell to everyone. Guess who they would sell their oil to if they had it? It would be the African nations, because there are sanctions on them currently. They can't export their oil to Western nations. This means that they're dependent on their African allies, who, if they turn on them, would mean they would be pressured. They would be resource strapped. Even if they had resources, they wouldn't be able to sell them. This means they're more likely to buckle in. So the negotiations you talk about, nothing happens currently. There is not enough pressure on them. Maybe before there was, right? But after the indictment, recently Omar Bashir went to South Africa and didn't get arrested even though South Africa was part of the ICC, right? So this means you have systematically removed pressure. Any threats you levy against him are redundant. That means he knows now there is no sense of accountability on them. And that is why there is no kinds of peace deal that you want can actually exist, right? So this is where we come in, because the point at which we intervene means even if negotiations and peace agreements are to happen, it's because we have gone in and he literally now knows there's something to lose. That will mean peace negotiations are more likely to happen. But here's the thing, the reason why this also needs to happen is because you need long-term reform and not some kind of like half-baked peace deal that will still put him in power, right? The reason why you need to change the administration and not just Omar Bashir is because it's not a one-person-led coalition that oppresses minorities. It's an entire tribe of people trying to ethnically cleanse minority tribes. This is why you need to be able to invade, to have wholesale reform, to need to have democracy, to need to have re-elections, which will most likely result in multi-coalition governments, power-sharing deals, because the country is heterogeneous, right? So if you have elections, that's what's most likely to happen on our side. So we think that's the most, and it's necessary. It's tough, but it's necessary to go through wholesale reform if you're ever to foresee conflict and oppression ending in Sudan. Opening, yeah.
Okay, it doesn't make sense, right? If your characterization is not that the government is perpetuating genocide for minorities, why does it make sense to invade the entire government and perpetuate the entirety of these innocent soldiers and people towards that invasion?
Because the government is the one committing genocide against people. Moving on. Okay. Two, why is AU a bad actor? Sit down. Why is AU a bad actor? Okay, so I mean, it's a good actor. They say it's a bad actor. It's not a bad actor, right? So first of all, these guys are like, guys, they don't have much resources. The blatant stereotyping of African countries is really annoying to me, right? So as Rafiq pointed out, 4 of the most developing countries in the world, fastest developing countries of the world, are in Africa. Guess what? Also, we are talking also about countries such as South Africa and Greece. We are talking about Kenya, which is one of the most biggest IT booming industries within the world. These are countries with resources and capability. Okay, by the way, Rafiq says there will be internal conflict, like in Mogadishu, when Egypt got upset that they attacked Islamic, what do you call it, radicals, right? The Egyptian government was the military government which was perpetrating violence against the Muslim Brotherhood. I think they're perfectly happy with going ahead and attacking Islamic insurgents. Sit down, right? But also, I think there's a bit of like what's called fiat in this debate, and we can fairly assume that African coalition would want to go in and have and agree on this invasion, right? But secondly, more importantly, is this: they have had successful invasions before. Mogadishu is largely safe, even after the West pulled out, because AU is stationed there protecting Mogadishu from insurgents. In Rwanda, right? When UN troops were there, there is absolutely nothing to stop the genocide. Genocide only ended when AU troops went in, ladies and gentlemen. So we think we have past history of them having successes. But more importantly, here's what we think it happens, right? All these kinds of terrorizing and rhetorical power of terrorist organizations and radical organizations they talk about happens regardless, right? Because you can always say, oh, minorities are doing this, minorities are doing that. But also, 2 responses to this. 1, African nations currently are also a lot of Muslims. You talk about Kenya, for example, have large significant amounts of Muslims. You talk about Guinea, you talk about Tanzania, you talk about Nigeria. All of these countries have a lot of Muslims, so we don't think that rhetoric is very powerful. But what is powerful is the funding and the implicit support they get from the government currently, the funding of militia groups. That's what we tackle by actually removing the power base through which they used to have rhetorical power to begin with, by tackling these groups. And we think they don't have that. But the kind of like alternative days, but also ladies and gentlemen, but also even if we have to assume that, I think the interest of African nations is to ensure a safe Sudan, because they also want peace for themselves. They also don't want a neighbor that keeps on sending refugees to their countries. And that is an interest that African nations would want, to be able to trade with Sudan, to be able to make sure they have long-term peace in Sudan.
Yeah, so we'd like to invite the whip from the opposition side.
Coming out of a civil war, we think Sudan is very vulnerable in terms of economic development and political stability and ethnic conflict, right? We think that invasion will take away the opportunity for Sudan to negotiate in an environment that's conducive. And number two, we think that in the process of rebuilding their nation out of the civil war, invasion is going to exacerbate the situation, right? Don't let opposing government lie to you and tell you that negotiation hasn't worked. When has it worked, right? Number one, when Liberia and Congo got out of the civil war, we successfully negotiated the resources that were split in between the two ethnic groups that was in that conflict. Number two, we think that UN peacekeepers have already been there. And like Rafiq said, right, where peace brokers or negotiation brokers like Norway and Switzerland has been in place to negotiate these deals. Number two, we think that Omar is a very reasonable person. Why? Within 2005, when they before the election, the government has already formed a power sharing government, right? In 2011, there was a successful negotiation on the succession between South Sudan and Sudan as well. We think the negotiation has worked within this country. Don't let government side lie to you. Few rebuttals before going into my issues, right? Number one, Mel told you that when invasion comes in, you're going to exacerbate the situation with ethnic groups, and there will be rebel groups be more radicalized and more extreme. We don't think that's true. Number one, these ethnic groups are more likely to negotiate on our side, because if the African Union comes in, it's seen as an agenda to then handle to the interest of one party instead of like transnational benefit, like for example like UN or Switzerland or Norway, who has no interest in taking that, right? We think that ethnic groups is more likely to retaliate on their side because they are overall the minorities within this group. Number two, Mayor told you that look, because there's no accountability under the status quo, therefore we need African Union to then invade, right? I have a question for you, Mayor. Number one, if the ICC have already given order against Omar al-Bashir and there's no answer from Omar, then how are you then sure the African Union are going to make sure that Omar al-Bashir gives up his power? It's not going to happen, right? Because ICC is a lot more powerful than the African Union, and even then, they are unlikely to make sure that Omar gives up. On our side, Omar al-Bashir has the interest to do so. Why? Number one, he needs to ensure that his oil fields are still, he can sell his oil fields to China corporations. He makes sure that Arab companies still buy his oil, right? Number two, he has a vested interest to maintain economic development and political stability in order for investors to not pull down. That's why we think the negotiations will work better on our side. Going to my issue, yes, ma'am.
The reason why your negotiations are still not favorable for the minorities, or the reason why Omar al-Bashir hasn't given himself up, is because neighboring countries still provide him that security. In our world, where we no longer do that, you no longer get that security. How do you take away that security from Omar al-Bashir?
But on a scale, African Union is also going to take sides and take interest within that conflict, right? Just because like they give security, we think that other corporations like China and Arab is going to help within negotiations, right? Number one, why do we need to intervene? Opening government said, and this is also under inclusive government as well, that the African Union has a principal obligation and responsibility to do so. Why? They talk about how there's a conflict in Sudan, they want to enforce security within the region, there's no attempt to negotiate and alternatives don't work, right? We think that African Union is not only the best people to do this negotiation. We think that they have failed in negotiation in the African Union, right? For example, in 1993, when they intervened within Togo, they splinter and exacerbate the inter-conflict problem, inter-ethnic conflict, right? Like the Allie, the Kabi, and the Wachi groups within Togo. We think that if African Union already have this sort of backtrack record within negotiations, we think that they are not the best people to do so. And even so like come and invade, right, which is to make it worse. We think that number two, because it is a nascent democracy, you need to understand this, Sudan has just came out of a civil war. We need to give them an opportunity to develop, right? Of course, we're going to take the trade-off that in the process of rebuilding a nation, conflicts is bound to happen. But just because there's conflict, you can't just invade every single time there's a conflict, right? Knowing that there's a possibility of them to develop, and knowing there's a possibility to have some more political stability, and we think the invasion is going to make it worse. Number three, there is an attempt to negotiate, right? And we think that negotiation is in the process of working, and we think that just because it's not seeing any results now, but the process is happening, we think we need to give an opportunity for the negotiations to happen. Number two, they said that, oh, this is in regards and response to closing government. They said that it's a basic obligation, and the benefits is, number one, we get more elections and political stability. But note that in Ameera's and Mubarrat's speech, both of them never proved to you the invasion would then lead to political stability and those elections. Right? They never told us the process in which, because African Union already has vested interest in both sides, how are they going to enhance the opportunities to get all these elections? No. So what did we tell you? What did we tell you from side closing opposition? We think that because in the context of Rafiq told you how we exacerbate the ethnic conflict, right? Like Omar al-Bashir has an ICC order against him, and the African Union is not going to help. He is not going to give up his power. The conflict between all of those, like South Sudan and Sudan, are split into two, and South Sudan has gotten the shit end of the deal, and we think that it's going to exacerbate the conflict. Number two, it harms the investment that's in there. Right? You need to know this, that China has a lot of stake in the states in Africa. Places like South Africa, places like Kenya, Ghana, and Nigeria, and even in Sudan, right? Number one, not only these investors will retaliate like what Rafiq said, which is to put in more money within these oil fields and to defend these oil fields, right? But number two, in the worst case scenario, China is going to pull out because all these investors always have vested interest in political government that is very stable, right? If in any way, these Arab countries or China or these oil corporations see that there's a lot of instability within that region, number one, the first outcome is they'll put in more money and retaliate. But number two, they'll pull out investment, knowing that Sudan needs this investment, Sudan needs this capital in order to further develop the economy and further enhance political stability. Number three, we think that this is a mutually exclusive harm coming from closing opposition. We are backtracking the process in which Sudan is in now, right? The attempts of moving forward from the Sudanese civil war is better on our side, because we think that Sudan historically has a power-sharing government and is willing to negotiate. For example, in 2005, right, the government of the National Unity, National Congress Party, and the Sudan's People Liberation Movement formed a power-sharing coalition within 2005 that led to an election. How did this happen? Negotiation. This is how you prove that the negotiation will work on our side. It is to prove that there is a power-sharing government and that historically they already have done it, and we think that it's going to work again, knowing that there is a neutral party within negotiation, not an African Union who has the best interest to take care of sides. And for looking for my closing line. Let's recognize one thing, right? There's a vested interest not only in the Sudanese government to want the country to be stable in terms of economic development and in political sphere. Not only parties like the negotiation brokers like Switzerland and Norway and China, oil companies and oil companies already have some form of vested interest to keep some form of peace in Sudan. We think that that's the best way to.
Alright, cool. Thank you for slow. We can't wait outside for a moment. Maybe longer. Let's just stay.